Paul. Thank you, Chairman. First item before you today is an application to fell a horse chestnut situated in the front garden of 27A Catisfield Road in Fareham. The application is to remove the tree on the basis that it's causing damage to the front garden wall and some damage to the front driveway or forecourt. Chairman, you will recall there was an application in 2015 to fell the same tree on the grounds it was dangerous due to increasing lean towards the road. That was refused by the committee in August 2015. Mr. Brooks subsequently went to appeal, and that appeal was dismissed in November of the same year. So what I've done, which might be helpful given the short duration between the two applications, is to show the photographs of the tree taken during the summer of 2015, and obviously the tree that I looked at on the pictures taken last month. So the tree is situated there on the top of the red line, mature tree in the front garden, 27A Catisfield Road. This tree taken from the east looking west, the householder's property there, with the red garage door and the large tree in the front garden. That was a picture taken of the tree during July 2015. And a picture from a similar angle taken last month. Again, just swinging round sort of counterclockwise. This is from the north in Chatsworth Close, again taken the summer of 2015. And the same position again taken several weeks ago, back in September. This probably might be a little bit more helpful because I managed to get them obviously not on the same screen. So on the left we've got the main trunk of the tree taken from the Mr. Brooks's property in the front garden, and the same position of the stem on the right, taken in September this year. Again, so moving round, taking with my back to the property, sort of from the due southish, looking north, Chatsworth Close opposite there, and that just shows the tree with the edge of the driveway adjacent to the stem on the right-hand photo there, which was taken last month. And so a similar shot taken with the wall in the background there, adjacent to the tree. On the left was the photo taken 2 years ago. Again, moving around, looking from the west, looking east, so road on the left, property on the right. You can see the sort of corner of the driveway there sweeps up with the ground and is sloping upwards towards the base of the tree. And again, you've got the front garden wall on the left of the tree there. So left-hand photo 2015 and the right-hand photo last month. That's a photo taken a couple of weeks ago. That's just putting the camera quite down so you can kind of see how the driveway does slope up towards the base of the tree, and then you've got the wall on the left-hand side. Just back to sort of a view you take if you stood there yourself. So again, looking down at the base of the tree with that corner of the driveway. Small crack just sort of running away on the corner there, otherwise it slopes up to the tree and the wall on the left-hand side. That's just a close-up of the wall, taken from within the property. And this view, which shows the whole wall from outside the property, so the tree behind looking perpendicular to number 27A. You've got the public highway footpath at the bottom there, and obviously that's a full sort of length of the wall there. There is a small bit of damage. Showing the next photograph, which is kind of along the mortar joints here and extends further off to the left, which you can see in the next photograph. So it's running up between, which is one brick there, a bit of mortar missing, but otherwise in the plane the wall looks reasonably normal. And a photograph taken adjacent to the wall from the driveway, 27A, with the camera against the flank of the wall looking to the east. Similar shot looking in the other direction from the neighbour's driveway. So I think I'll allow Mr. Brooks to do his deputation to take any questions from the panel, obviously in response to Mr. Brooks' talk to you. Thanks, Dan.
Brooks? Yeah. There's nothing. I think the problems of the tree shedding is adequately covered by the people who suffer from it, either both sides and across the way. However, Mr. Johnson is, my experience of Mr. Johnson is he's somewhat lax and loose with the truth. Fareham Borough Council, he referred to the previous one on the 10th of the 7th 15. He decided that the distortion of the forecourt was unimportant. And does he know this? Has he got ground penetrating radar built in? He went again recently, whilst I was away, and his comment to my neighbour was, nothing has changed. It has damaged the wall. He says in one place, in his statement here, that there is one break. There are two fractures. He seems to have missed one. He's also missed the displacement. Okay? Okay. In his previous presentation to you people, he used the word amenity 11 times, 4 times in one paragraph. I draw your attention to the fact that the town and country people who drafted the Act find it inappropriate to define the word amenity. He hides behind the word amenity. He's not interested, he's interested in keeping the tree. It's not his home that's being damaged, it's mine. It's not his forecourt that's uneven, it's mine. And the guy who came here and declined to send a report said he was rather concerned if his mother had to walk on it. It's completely, it has not changed, and yet there is a discrepancy of over 1 inch in one place. It's also not taken account of the fact of the construction of the drive, which accommodates movement of the leaves, of the roots. He didn't inspect it carefully because it was covered with leaves. That is when it's not covered very much. He doesn't have to do it. Okay? Application, Johnson, oh, he quotes amenity. Oh yes, I've had words with Mr. Johnson on the phone. This guy says, he asked for my qualifications and I gave him some of them. He then tried to imply that although I was not working, it didn't count, but he was very clear in telling me that he was an arboriculturist and will be an arboriculturist when he retires. The man's a fool. He's an idiot.
Mr. Brooks.
Yeah, he is an idiot. And he has no interest. He's interested in keeping the tree. It is my home that's being destroyed. I am over 80 years old. I don't need this hassle. Okay? Oh, by the way, I do not trust Mr. Johnson. He is not trustworthy. He has a very convenient memory. Also his mate,
Right, thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Smith.
Right, members. Comments?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I would firstly say that Mr. Brooks' use of language is entirely inappropriate. It's offensive and it is not called for. He doesn't help his own cause, and he's done himself absolutely no favours at all by being offensive to an officer of the council. Not one officer actually, but 2 officers. First point. Now moving on to the application. We get 2 types of applications here. One, if I can say, for buildings and one for trees. Buildings we have a set of rules for, and we can apply an interpretation of those, but we have a fairly strict set of rules to go by. Trees, we don't so much. We are dependent on the experts, and the expert in our case is Paul, and I would find it very difficult to move away from the recommendation of the expert in this matter. I am not qualified to say whether that tree is dangerous, about to fall down, diseased or whatever. So I think in these instances I am dependent on our tree expert. And I've read this, and quite clearly I think amenity is a word that comes up regularly, and I guess that is in the regulations, the amenity value of a tree. So I can find no way to go against the recommendation that Paul has made and the recommendation in the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, I suppose I want to echo exactly what Councillor Ford said. I found Mr Brooks offensive and unnecessary. I think the name calling of an officer is totally unnecessary and certainly doesn't help the cause whatsoever. Our officer, Mr Johnson, is a professional officer who does an excellent job. We hear of the various works that he does over the years, and all I can say is he's a very professional officer and certainly doesn't need that kind of comment coming out. With regards to the application itself, I'm more than happy. I've visited the site to have a look at the tree. There is amenity value to it. So my view is it's a healthy tree, so it remains. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with the comments that other members have made at the start of what they've said, and I will leave that at that point. I think what might have been helpful in the report is that as this went to appeal, we've got no real mention about what the inspector said and how he looked at it on the last occasion. And I think that might have been helpful for us to make a decision of how he saw the tree, because obviously is the situation at the moment is that Mr Brooks sees it in one way, Paul sees it in a different way. The inspector, who's independent of everybody, would have looked at it and made comments about the state of that tree and what have you. Now that would have been, I think, quite helpful to have actually seen and heard. Now whether we can have any comments from that now, it might help us to make a decision based on what we see today, what the inspector saw 2 years ago, and be fair to everybody concerned.
Paul, do you have any comments on?
Yeah, I apologise for that omission. I mean, in simple terms, obviously the report is still publicly available. The appeal inspector dismissed it on the grounds that the tree was unsafe due to its lean or its condition, found no defects with the tree, normal risk of failure, and found the tree was otherwise safe and healthy. And in terms of the lean, some of the ancillary issues about cleaning up didn't add any weight to those. And in terms of its amenity value, which isn't defined in the Act, Mr Brooks is absolutely right. I think we understand what it is. Certainly in planning terms, we have to obviously make sure we articulate that correctly to the public. But a large, prominent tree, as the picture shows, it clearly fulfills the criteria to be worthy of a TPO, and the appeal inspector found in favour of that and dismissed it on both counts.
Yes, I know this tree well as I live around the corner in Highlands Road. I think it does add to amenity. The presumption is that trees remain unless there is clear sign of dead wood or dangerous branches, in which case, in consultation with the council as our bioculturalist, an agreement can be reached to do such works as required to a tree. As most members know, I've got 5 fine oak trees on my land, and I cherish them, and I would be horrified if anything happened to them. As I've also said, trees are like children and need looking after, and it may be that there is an argument in consultation with Mr Johnson for doing some work on the trees. But as it stands now, I would certainly support the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. It seems to me really quite simply that the comparative photographs we've seen today show no appreciable change from those we saw 2 years ago, and therefore no appreciable change from the reasoning of our decision and the appeal decision 2 years ago, and therefore I will go along with the recommendation today.
Just one technical question, Chairman. Trees of this sort, the canopy is normally equivalent to the root. Sorry, I was saying if it was an oak tree, the canopy would be equate to the root pattern underneath. Is it the same with a horse chestnut?
Yeah, not quite. I mean, roots from trees in a normal situation will try and root freely in a radial pattern. In urban areas, they're very much going to be constrained by what we do around them. So obviously the trees probably sat along Catisfield Road is quite an established road. We know that the 3 properties that are there were built, I think 40 odd years ago when the old house was knocked down. So that will affect, the driveways will affect the rooting pattern, but there's in principle a similar amount below ground as you see above, but it's in a very different way because it actually spreads out a long way and it doesn't actually go as deep as we think. But if structures are built correctly, particularly dwellings, they're not going to be adversely affected by trees. The tree was there first. No one's dismissing there is some minor damage to the wall. As outlined, we can see the cracks in the wall. The issue is whether the wall is no longer viable as a structure, and my view is that it isn't. And we can see the photos; it's barely out of alignment. Maybe a little bit of minor maintenance will stop weather exacerbating those small cracks. The driveway, I don't know if it was laid up at that angle against the tree. Obviously, there's some distortion there and some damage, and no one's dismissing the the incredible mess that some of these trees create. It's certainly not something that just there's an issue with horse chestnuts. Oaks this year have been prolific in terms of how much acorns they've generated, and they do cause a lot of mess, and depending on people's circumstances that may be more or less of a burden, but in simple terms it's generally classed as part of living with trees, and certainly not a reason for removing a tree of this stature.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, Chairman, there seems to be no substantial change from the time when the inspector made his decision. Presumably the inspector is being described as loose with the truth. I could not support the application and suggest it's refused.
Right. I think I'm disappointed that Mr. Brooks took the attitude he did. I've known Paul Johnston for many years, and he's a highly qualified officer who looks after thousands of trees across this borough in a very proper manner. And it's just bad that these comments were made, and I'm sorry for you, Paul, that you had to put up with that. From my own point of view, I mean, I look very carefully at the pictures, and there does not appear to be any change either in the lean or the ground heave. As Councillor Davis said, I've got some very large trees in my garden and I have to clear up after them. But I wouldn't think of taking them down just because there's a mess. There's always a mess. Every winter, every storm, they shed branches. And I have ground heave because I've got different species of trees, which the ground heave is greater. But I wouldn't remove them for that purpose. So I think I agree with the officer's report. And if I can have a proposal and a second for the recommendation, that'd be great. Proposed by Councillor Manbury, seconded by Councillor Cartwright. Those in favour, please show.